Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We've got a great show lined up for you today. We've got Joe Hoft of the Gateway Pundit and JoeHoft.com. We're going to be talking everything Trump 2.0. Kash Patel one step closer to the confirmation as the director of the FBI, and so much more. You're not going to want to miss this one. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. And we are back. We are joined by Joe Hoft. Joe, this is the first time that we've spoken since the inauguration of the president, since the 2.0 has really taken off. We're just shy of 1 month deep, and love him or hate him, this is the most active administration I've ever seen in my life. And there's a lot of good, if not great, here. Obviously, the dismantling of U.S. aid on the positive. The declassification stuff is great. I want it to move even quicker, obviously. Call me greedy. The pardons out of the gate. There was no question. He just did the blanket pardon thing. Even got Ross Ulbricht in there on day 2. Hey, he was 24 hours short. I'm going to give him a push on that one. Made the libertarians happy. Exiting the WHO. Just the fact that I've gone on for about 90 seconds is pretty impressive. And then let's throw on the one that I think is being underestimated and needs to be talked about probably the most. He stripped a lot of these lifetime military-industrial complex intelligence ghouls of their security clearances. Never been done before. I had Cornell West on the program last week, and he dodged the question, but I was like, you know what? I didn't like John Brennan before I knew Donald Trump was going to be involved in politics. I never wanted that guy to have a security clearance. The Michael Haydens of the world. You go down the list. It's a great thing. So, in your opinion, what has been the strongest out of the gates, and what do we really need to keep an eye on in the coming days and weeks?
Jason, great to be back. Great to see you again. And so much there to talk about. What's the greatest act so far? Well, I think we probably both feel like the best is yet ahead. And that's hard to believe with the all the actions that have taken place. And so I love the January 6th, the pardons that night on inauguration night. We had an event in D.C. Jim and I, the Gateway Pundit, and a group from Oregon, had about 500-600 people there in a packed venue with great music and everything. And at 10 o'clock, they announced that January 6ers have been pardoned. And there's a couple guys there, and they broke down and they started crying right in front of me. And it was just a moving time. It was a celebration.
As they should. Because again, for those on the peripheral who may not have really been paying attention and thought that there was an insurrection or that these people deserved it, so many of these people were charged with things or for things that would have been a ticket, a misdemeanor, and then not only charged, but put through living hell and put into solitary confinement for 90+% of their stay. A lot of people can't grasp that. They watch cop shows, they watch TV shows. I promise you, somebody puts you in a 6x6 cell for 10 hours, let alone 24 hours for weeks at a time, you're going to break down. You're not as hard as you think you are. And for them to do what they did to those American citizens, that was such a huge thing. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah. No, you're right, Jason. When Gateway Pundit came out with the piece, they showed this guy, Ryan Samsel, in a closet, it looked like, with a bucket. And that was his toilet. And it was just so barbaric. I happened to be with General Flynn that day. It happened during the Lindell, one of the symposiums, and we were at. And I was interviewing him, and he says, I oversaw the Afghanistan, inmates that were captured during the war there. And Flynn goes, we never treated anybody that bad. We never did. And those guys You're right. They went through hell. I had Stuart Rhodes on my show this past week, and he shared that, as you know, Stuart Rhodes was one of the leaders of the Oath Keepers, and they brought these guys in late to freaking ice this thing, that this was all a concerted effort with Trump to destroy the country, to overthrow an election, which was the total opposite. This clearly was an op, as you know and I know. The effort was steal the election and then step in and accuse us of attempting to steal the election. Twisted 100%, a total color revolution. People like Norm Eisen and Weissman and all these monsters, these 51 monsters were all involved in this whole scam. And then you get people like Stuart Rhodes, an innocent man who's created a group to protect Americans from Antifa and the likes of that. So these guys show up there on January 6th, along with others, to protect these innocent Americans who are protesting the stolen election. And what happens is Stuart Rhodes says they arrest him, they bring him in. They don't really, it's all garbage against the guy. And then what happens is they say to him, okay, here's the deal. And this is our DOJ, and this is why they have like a 99% rate of putting people in prison. They say to him, with all the might of the U.S. government behind them, billions and trillions of dollars, and attorneys everywhere, the courts, the judges that all used to be in the DOJ, that were prosecutors in the DOJ, now they're judges. This whole monstrosity of a setup. They say to Stuart Rhodes, well, if you plead and say that you worked with President Trump to overthrow the election, we'll give you maybe 2 years instead of 20. And Rhodes said, screw you, I'm not going to do that. That's a lie. And so he gets 20 years. And he says, this is what they did to me. There were some people that bent and said, yeah, they didn't want to go to prison. He goes, I wasn't going to do that. These guys were put away for 20 years. And by the way, Trump only commuted his sentence and a couple others. He says, we need a pardon because I've got a felony on my record, and that's terrible. And then they messed with these guys. Stuart Rhodes, he went to see some of these January 6ers like the day after the inauguration. They were still being housed in that DC gulag. And one of the judges there claims that he's breaking, the rules of him getting out of prison by going there, trying to prevent him from even being in DC. And that had to be fought by the new guy who's running the DOJ in DC, Ed Martin, who I know, by the way. He's from St. Louis. And anyways, it's this constant battle. Here's a piece I'll give you, Jason. There's so many great things that Trump's done already. I don't know how to list them all. I think January 6th was huge. I think bringing the blessing of having Elon Musk on board is incredible. I've just listened to a piece now. The left is melting down. They want to destroy the messenger, whereas 90% of America says, yeah, we want to know about corruption and we want it to end. The left is fighting the release of this information, which tells us everything. So just the whole setup right now, Jason, quite frankly, yeah, there's these little pieces that maybe haven't fallen in the way we'd like them or as quick, but overall, it's a mountain of evidence, of action that is going to crush this deep state, And I just noticed before the show, the Russian leader is landing in Saudi Arabia to go to peace talks with the U.S. They're not even bringing in Zelensky and the EU, which I think is good because I think Zelensky is as crooked as the day is long. All of this stuff, it's just going on, and we can keep moving forward. But here's one point that I also want to mention. I just found this out too. 75 court cases now against Trump and his administration. 75 corrupt actions, lawfare, trying to stop President Trump. So you're right. We got rid of these monsters and their access to the sensitive information, top secret information, people like Brennan and Clapper and the many people on that 51 list. But they're still coming after us, and they're still doing their lawfare. And we got to figure out a way to really address that. I think more than anything, just to speed things up, because we need to get these people behind bars, I think, as soon as we can.
Well, I certainly want to get into the possibility of criminal accountability, in this broadcast, because I think that'll have a lot to do, obviously, with Patel and the FBI. We got to look at the pre-pardon system, get a real ruling on that. I think there's questions surrounding two of the things that sound really great. In that, you have these executive orders. Number one, that's going to take quote unquote government out of censorship. I'm not sure exactly what that means yet. Pretty short executive order. We both know that the Missouri versus Biden case, when it went to the federal Supreme Court, they pulled the no standing nonsense. So a lot on that road. The cartel terrorism thing also concerns me for a number of reasons. Maybe we can get into later. But you mentioned one thing, and I think this is the wrong move from the administration. You talked about Flynn, and you talked about the way that they held prisoners during Afghanistan, Iraq, war on terror, etc. Everybody by 2008 that was in the Democratic field said, let's close Guantanamo Bay. I don't really want it to be repurposed into a prison. You want to put that as, say, a facility where you've got these migrants there for 2 weeks to a month to get them out to other prison facilities. In other words, a processing center. I'm fine with that. I realize that's a military base. I don't think that you need to be legitimizing black sites when we're trying to get to transparency. And I mean, when you look at who's housed there, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the other two 9/11 defendants, well, we're 20 plus years on from that very transparent 9/11 investigation. And that's not how you have, people actually believe the administration. And by the way, that's not where, again, any kind of black site, Abu Ghraib, let's get rid of that stuff. Let's be transparent. So let's not make that into a prison for 30,000 people. I get it. A lot of these people are bad. If that's the case, supermax them. You know what I mean? Let's bring back the one off the coast there, the one that's a tourist site, Alcatraz. Let's do that. I'm fine with that. But again, processing center not there. What are your thoughts on that? Because I do think there are some cavalier moves, and I don't want to see it go in the wrong direction. I'm very encouraged when we are talking foreign policy with Tulsi Gabbard getting in as DNI. That kind of goes to this accountability, criminal accountability, prosecutions, etc. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know why we're even keeping that facility open in Cuba. It doesn't make sense. It's got such a nasty name. So I think, yeah, you're right. You move anything there, whatever the reason, it's not a good look. Most Americans probably don't think highly of that entity. It's been bashed so bad by this media. But yeah, so I agree with that. But I'll tell you what, another piece that I heard, I was with a real top level guy on the day before 2 days before the inauguration, and had the luxury of sitting down for dinner with him. And he said, if we don't get John Brennan basically locked up within 24 hours of this administration, it may be all over. And so he didn't get locked up, but he did lose his security clearance, which is a good thing. And there still needs to be, that's why we need Kash Patel in place, like immediately. And that's being postponed. And look this weekend, Jason, how Lindsey Graham and Joni Ernst and Conyers and the Dems, this uniparty group of senators, goes over to meet with Zelensky. I mean, what the hell's going on? Zelensky just said last week that he's lost 100 out of $170 billion. He doesn't know where it went. I don't know if you can believe it or not, but here's these senators going over there, and Lindsey Graham saying this is he's the greatest politician I've ever worked with, or president, or something just insane like that. And so we've got to get some of these guys, I think, quickly somehow held accountable for their past actions. And I've heard treason, murder, and maybe one other crime is something that there's no statute of limitations on. So the act of treason that took place under Trump's first administration, that coup d'etat, has never been addressed fully, I don't think. And so we need to work on that too. That's the big thing, and they're holding off on that. I guess maybe the point I'm trying to make too is that some of this stuff, the Senate's got to get going, and the House. We need to impeach these guys, these judges. This stuff needs to get going. We don't have the House or Senate right now that we need to really clean this country up. And that's going to be a challenge this whole Trump administration unless we can replace these guys and get free and fair elections. Ultimately, we get free and fair elections, we'll have the people there to shut down this the deep state. So
The books are The Steal 1 through 3. You can check them out. Everything else over at joehoft.com. We're going to take a break. I'm going to talk about some of the things that Joe just hit on. Then we're going to get into declassification, accountability, and what the reality is of the next 4 years. You're not going to want to miss it. More Making Sense of the Madness after this.
Everything you're showing us, Steve, I'm looking at it going, I want one of those. I want one of those. And I think you guys are too. So don't forget to go to the Patriot TV store and you can see all of Steve's Made in America shirts and just everything. Shirts, hats, socks, sunglasses, you name it, workout gear, you've got everything.
So we're going to bring some of our other people back again to show you some of the other items.
Okay.
And we keep changing so you get a good idea of what we carry.
Yeah, I mean,
See a lot of,
exactly. Look
items.
at the variety and look at the choices you have. Today's guest again was Steve Stern of the Flag Shirt Company. And again, they've been in business over 70 years. High quality products, fast delivery, and amazing customer service. So for any reason something doesn't fit, you can send it right back. And again, I'm going to say it one more time, the Patriot TV store. You've got to go to Patriot TV store and get your items now.
What do a neurosurgeon, a country artist, and a television and radio host have in common? They all saw the writing on the wall. Big banks sharing your financial information with big government. Join them as owners in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank that protects your privacy, security, and liberty. Invest today at own.oldglorybank.com.
And we are back. So just kind of going back to some of the things that you hit on. You know, one of the other aspects of Guantanamo Bay that really annoyed me is during the QAnon era, the idea of Gitmo was like legitimized and applauded by these fantasists that were like, oh, John McCain is in Gitmo and he's paying for his war crimes, or we've secretly cut a deal with Assange and he's safe in Guantanamo Bay. Don't worry, Trump's going to roll him out. All these fantasy Johnny nonsense things that did nobody any favors, because you question anything, then all of a sudden you're a part of that crowd and they love to bring that up. So that's another reason not to legitimize Guantanamo Bay in any way. You talked about Brennan specifically. You know as well as I know that we already have Brennan in the court system in that Butowski-Hirsch case involving Seth Rich. And when we're talking about Brennan, we're also talking about McCabe. This is another guy who had his security clearances stripped for good reason. You mentioned treason. I mean, just on the peripheral of that story alone, with the leaked Hirsch tapes and that court case, you could make an argument that all the pieces for, you know, criminal intent against the president and the administration is right there in front of us, right? And probably stretches out further. So, you know, we also talked about 9/11 recently. Kurt Weldon, who headed up the Abel Danger hearings, and Anthony Schaefer, who was a part of that, have now come out and said they're in talks with this administration to get that stuff out. Weldon did an interview on Jimmy Dore. Shortly after that, Schaefer posted it on his socials, said, yes, this is true. We are in talks. I think that transparency needs to come, especially you want criminal accountability. I'd love to get your take on the first three that they've now signed off on, because I do believe there's going to be more coming. But at the same time, I think that we have to remain skeptical as of yet as what we are going to get and in what manner on MLK, JFK, and RFK. But certainly, no matter what, if they are honest with us and they put out all the documentation in a unredacted or very minimally redacted format, that's really going to change the narrative of our three-letter agencies and kind of, I would say, our involvement, not just with like the military-industrial complex and these cutouts, but organized crime. You know, you as well as I know that organized crime has been an integral part of these intelligence networks from the very beginning, in blackmail networks and running drugs, booze, women, you name it. I mean, you talk about MK Ultra. Let's remember the CIA was running brothels coast to coast while that was going on in Operation Midnight Climax. You don't think that involves organized crime? I mean, give me a break. So, what are your thoughts on what this road to declassification and then accountability really is? And then how far can they take it? Can they take it to 9/11, past 9/11? You talked about the elections. You're damn right. What about Russiagate? I mean, there's just so much there if we're going to take it to a modern level and get that accountability.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I know Tony Schaefer as well. Good guy, and if he's saying that they're looking into this or doing negotiations, then that's right. That's what's going on. Yeah, I love the Bobby Kennedy Senior, JFK, and MLK, Martin Luther King assassination investigation. I love that. I hope they release all the documents. I don't hope we don't have like the Twitter files release where just certain documents were released to us and you trust us. That's the key stuff. I don't like that at all. I want full transparency. I want it all like you. And so I didn't like that about Twitter, and because it just even their messengers I didn't really like. I mean,
well, hold on. Let me stop you there because I think that's an important case, right? First of all, you had the Supreme Court case, which was just Biden versus Missouri, but the censorship was going on even in the Trump administration. We've got to acknowledge that. Now, I don't think that was Trump saying we need to censor this stuff. But again, that bureaucracy that surrounded it was already embedded in all these things and taking place. Like you said, the messengers, Schellenberger, Taibbi, etc. Never been my favorite either. Back when Taibbi was with the Rolling Stone in the 9/11 days, he actually wrote a piece on the Rolling Stone blog about me and the other guys, and we went back and forth about 9/11 2 decades ago now, which is incredible.
Wow.
But I think he's kind of come around on those things. The ironic thing about that is that Taibbi is the messenger in the beginning, but he wants more. And then all of a sudden, he starts posting Substack clicks, and then he's thrown under the bus by Musk. I used to see Matt Taibbi in my feed all the time. Not anymore. Don't see that anymore. And, you know, he was one of the guys, really the specific guy that I will give credit to. See, he said when you looked at these algorithms, they could turn you down to the point where you're not seen by anybody, or you just can't trend, or you hit a certain peak, etc. That's not free speech. And I still believe, in fact, we know it's still going on X today. Sure. And that's supposed to be the free speech platform. So I'm with you 1,000%. That's my point on this executive order on free speech. What does it exactly mean, and what are the steps we're going to take? Because does that mean that we're going to start getting meritocracies again? To their credit, like when Zuckerbro comes out, right? And he's got the hair and the new gold chain, and he's at the table. I think outlets like yours, the Gateway Pundit, are now once again going to be able to engage on that platform and advertise, right? And maybe not get their links as shadow banned. I don't think you're going to get the mainstream punch. You don't think they're going to let that happen? You don't think the Daily Wires of the world also, that's the move? I think that's the move, is just put a few of them out there.
Let me tell you, Jason, just on that. So Daily Wire, we mentioned that. Ben Shapiro back in 2017 was dining. We have a picture of him dining with Zuckerberg. And at the same time, that seemed to be the only conservative website that was getting traffic on Facebook. In 2016, Gateway Pundit was one of the top websites, conservative-wise, along with Breitbart and a few others. But Gateway Pundit was consistently number 3 in Facebook, Twitter, etc. There was a report that was done by the left. I believe it was a Soros-funded entity to call us fake news. We twisted that name and turned it back on them and trumped it as well in a brilliant way to just accuse them of fake news, and it stuck with them, which was great because, you know, the stuff they do post is garbage. But over the next year, Gateway Pundit was censored so bad on Facebook that it was, I did a study for Jim. I'm over in Hong Kong. I got the data and looked at this, and I said, my God, the conservative top 10 sites before the 2016 election compared to a year later were getting like 95% less volume on Facebook than they did before. And Zuckerberg would go in and say, no, we don't censor anybody. And yeah, and we're like, what the,
And
what
you're
the hell's going
paying,
on
by
here?
the way, in a lot of ways too. That's the other thing. And first of all, I don't like the fact that you're picking winners and losers. And USAID has now exposed the fact that a lot of these media operations were receiving money from the government. A lot of people talk Politico, but the Reuters thing is so huge to me because when you're talking about quote unquote authoritative sources and down the middle, it's always Associated Press and Reuters are supposed to be that gold standard. You literally have a Defense Department contract where they are involved in social engineering and deception. Now, they flip it to say they're going after the misinformation crew. Look at the track record of the mainstream media and the authoritative sources, not just over the last 5 years or 10 years, but again, as more and more of these declassifications come out, these government contracts, over the last several decades, it ain't great, Joe. It's not great at all. In fact, they're the majority of the time not only managing narratives, but pushing false and deceptive ones for egregious and just grotesque agendas.
Yeah, I agree. And getting back to like Daily Wire, even what we saw there is that was that Ben Shapiro and his team was not afraid to trash Trump, and they were the conservative one that was left at Facebook. So they trashed Trump, put other conservative stories, and they were allowed to stay on Facebook. Everybody else is getting crushed. So recently, Jim received an award at this Able Child event, and Jim listed all these things that the Gateway pundits had to go through. I believe he's been deplatformed through a bank. I believe at one time he's been, like I mentioned, Facebook cut us down, Twitter cut us down. I lost my Twitter account. I never did get it back. They haven't given it back to me. I had to start a new one. And like you talk about shadow ban, I got, whatever, 6,000 followers and I get 20 views on a tweet. It's like, what's going on here?
And by the way,
so you're right.
You have to pay to be a part of the conversation now. So everything's reversed. Like, remember when everything was free and then there was the meritocracy. If people watched your stuff, you could make a living off of it. And they would push you on the algorithm because people were actually interested. Not anymore.
Well, and the people they pushed, and I think some of them too, for me, there's almost a message that if somebody jumps real quick to a bunch of followers, then I'm looking at them not as somebody I'm looking at them as maybe some deep state or an operative or something. There's some sort of connection that this person's making so much volume, especially when I'm like, I don't think the stuff there's that great anyway. So I notice that stuff. I'm not kidding you. I see some people like myself getting crushed. You mentioned that case against Missouri against the Biden. Gateway Pundit was a part of that. We filed some articles that we said we were censored on. The judge of the Supreme Court comes back and says, and they list my name in the case and say, well, Jim Hoft, you don't have standing in this, but Joe Hoft does because he was censored in this case or in this piece that you used as evidence that the federal government was censoring you. So I'm listed actually in the Supreme Court finding, and what we have to do is go back and just add all these articles to the list of articles that we were censored at. We were hammered by these guys. There's a whole entity called the EIP. That's what it was, an Election Integrity Partnership or something, that their whole purpose was to censor people like us. Gateway Pundit was twice as many as Breitbart. And as far as hits, like 45 to 20 after the election. And I really believe a lot of those were mine using my old auditing techniques and work that I've done for years. It's like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. No, this isn't. I don't care about the little stuff. I don't care about 10 ballots missing over here, found in a ditch or something. I was looking for big ticket because Joe Biden didn't get 81 million votes. And that's what I ended up writing my books about. Ultimately was the whole big picture. And Jason, this is it. We found this nonprofit recently that has this map of all these entities that are connected. We call it the election industrial complex, and they don't even list Dominion in this list. But there's my first book. I talked about what happened before the election and all big media and big tech and all these entities that were going against us. And then my second book's where I lay it all out, what happened, and all these reasons why the election was stolen. And the ultimate reason at the end of each chapter is because it never should have been certified. Nobody in the right mind, an auditor of integrity, would never have certified this stuff. And then my third book was afterwards in the cover-up, which was all part of January 6th. It was the 4 people that died on January 6th. I'd guess that most Americans, maybe more than 50% still, don't know that 4 Trump supporters died that day. And probably another huge percent believes that 5 policemen did die. And that's a lie. So there's been a lot of misinformation. You talk about misinformation, all to get Trump, and then trying to take people like Stuart Rhodes and force them into making up lies to say that they worked with Trump to overthrow the government. This is the illness that we have. I think, Jason, the hurdle that we have in front of us, even though we've got maybe the best people on earth behind us. I mean, we could argue every one of these individuals, but I mean, there are some incredible people on this team as a whole. As you look at it with Bobby Kennedy now, I believe in over the medical community, and Elon over here digging into the data. Trump himself, I think, is maybe the greatest politician. I'll say this, Jason, you may disagree, but the greatest politician ever. This guy, his story is remarkable from start to finish, from getting, attacked, Russia collusion, impeachment, stolen election, January 6th, to, multiple cases trying to put him away for like 900 years in prison. Then you've got a couple assassination attempts, and then Elon jumps on board, and then RFK, and then all of a sudden he wins this election, and now he's in, and he is, like you said, tearing it up these first 30 days. Great strategy. They can't keep up, even though I find out they've got 75 cases against us already. So we've got to stop that. But there's this team is got. I think we've got the right team. Maybe we can argue 1 or 2 people, but the problem is this corruption. It's so deep. You mentioned, the mafia being involved. I actually believe it's communist China is involved. Foreign entities are involved. And if you asked me, did Biden do anything that hurt China? I would say no. I would say everything he did helped China in his destruction of this country over the last 4 years. Just brutal. So I think there's that piece that we need to look at. This foreign interference in American affairs under Biden is huge. I'll tell you one piece. I just read this about Canada. The port in Vancouver is owned by China, this guy says. He says that's why this fentanyl comes in, because China runs the port there.
Well, all right, we got to take a break. When we come back, let's talk about that aspect, because I'm going to make the argument that if you really want to look at China and kind of this criminal globalization integration, you've got to go back to the Kissinger years, really, Nixon, where you start really building these relationships. We talk about NGOs and all this funding. Rockefeller's big time behind that. And then when you talk about modernization, well, you can't help but talk about companies like Google, where there's supposed to be some private company that's traded on the stock market. All sorts of defense contractors here. Origin story from our intelligence and defense network. I mean, the original funding for the algorithm that gave us the search engine was from NASA and DARPA in the National Library Initiative. They thanked them for it. I mean, we know the ARPANET is created by them. And then the funding comes from In-Q-Tel. And in the early 2000s, you get Eric Schmidt, Mr. National Security, to this day on that board. And remember, that's when you start getting that integration into China. People threw a little bit of a fit, and they should have, when we had Dragonfly come out and Google was working on that censored internet. Well, what do we have with Google in America? It's not Chinese-style censorship. It's just censorship. So it's kind of that conglomerate. But I want to talk about that and more, because those are actually some of the concerns under this administration. I don't think Trump gets tech as much as he should. Again, he made good with the Bitcoin libertarian crowd with Ulbricht, and I think he made the right decision there. But does he know what he's getting into with the Altmans, the Zuckerbergs, the Bezoses, and especially the Larry Ellisons of the world? We're going to talk about that and much more making sense of the madness after this.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
You know, if I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep and feeling with more energy, more get up and go, and it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
What do a neurosurgeon, a country artist, and a television and radio host have in common? They all saw the writing on the wall. Big banks sharing your financial information with big government. Join them as owners in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank that protects your privacy, security, and liberty. Invest today at own.oldglorybank.com.
And we are back. You know, I think in order to do what you were talking about, to get away from China, there's just so much there, especially with a company like Google, right? Because that's just scratching the surface. Everybody knows that China's heavily invested in companies like Smithfield in this country, right? And Smithfield, I mean, they have like 80 name brands. Hormel, it's a big thing here in the Midwest. You're not supposed to grab the Smithfield because it's the Chinese meat. That's integrated with people like Gates. If we get into the COVID 1984 nightmare, right, and we go up to even further, I mean, we talked about Russiagate, we talked about all these other things. You're looking at that plausible deniability circle that I think is there on purpose. And that's the United States military-industrial complex working with the Chinese military-industrial complex on bioweapons and using private corporations and funding to do it with EcoHealth Alliance. I mean, even Redfield, who's, I believe he just got a high-level position under Kennedy, they're bringing him back, has acknowledged the Chapel Hill association to the virus itself, which is not supposed to be talked about. Obviously, the narrative shifted officially as soon as Ratcliffe got in on the CIA and they declared a lab leak. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it was a seeded thing. That's another argument. But do you understand what I'm saying when we're talking about China? Yeah, but when we're talking about China, we're talking about a vast number of NGOs and big-time quote-unquote corporations that have contracts with our government and Defense Department, right? I mean, Google, again, the big news is, oh, we're going to do AI weapon systems now. I'm like, you're always an AI weapon system. When did you ever stop? Like, what are you talking about? So when we are talking about that, right, and you see Trump up there with the Ellisons, I think that's the big blind spot. And Vance is obviously very pro-technology. I'm not a Luddite at all. You know, and I think another thing that's going to come out of this whole Doge situation is you are going to see a lot of streamlining of automation, AI, and government programs that are stripped of a lot of people, which needs to happen. I mean, that you look at our budget, that's a positive thing. At the same time, let's see what comes out of it. So what are your thoughts on that? Because China, again, so involved in so many of those things. Well, what are you going to do? Are you just going to cut them off? Or are you just going to sign another executive order and then say, no, we're going to nationalize everything that you're involved in? I mean, talk about trade wars. That would be a hell of a beginning to a trade. Forget about tariffs. That would send the economy into a whirlwind. What do you think?
Well, you know, as you were talking there, I started to think, you know, and getting back to your first question today was really, what's the greatest thing Trump did? I think what happened on inauguration night as we're having a party, we're enjoying ourselves, knowing we've got a lot of work to do. The fight is just starting, and that night while we're doing all that, there's these young guns in the basement of the Treasury running running against these systems. Trump's given them full authority and access to do what they're doing, and they break in, basically hack into the Treasury system, and by morning, after probably quite a few of these power drinks, they ended up they were moving on to their third database. So that was incredible stuff. That was really awesome. Go after the money first. They always say that, follow the money. And man, they were on it, and that led the left to freak, and they didn't have an answer for a few days. By that time, he's into USAID. By that time, he's into this, and now all they have is lies. I don't know if you saw 60 Minutes the other day. Just this lady up there complaining. She works for USAID, and she's now going to starve to death and all this. And Elon says, "Well, we gave everybody an 8-month severance package, which you're going to be really lucky to get in the corporate world, unless you're a real high up or something." And so
you're lucky to get a 3-month severance package in 2025.
2 week. Give me a break. You know what I mean? So she was lying because she didn't even work for USAID. She worked for a contractor that worked for USAID. Then we find out that she actually was a speechwriter for USAID. Actually, she was Samantha Power's speechwriter for USAID, and she also was complaining on a video a couple days prior out there saying, well, we had to go in and get rid of the books on our shelves and stuff and anything that would be incriminating. So this is who, CBS 60 Minutes uses a couple nights ago as their, star witness against what we're doing here. So we're going to continue to combat these lies. So I'm sorry for taking you off track here.
No,
China,
you know what? I want to talk
China
about 60 Minutes
real.
for a second. Because
yeah.
I actually reposted it this morning, but we all know about the Kamala Harris interview that they edited. But it also has now come out, they edited that famous Leslie Stahl interview as well, where she just tells Trump literally flat out that he was not spied on several times, and then says, this is 60 Minutes. We have to be able to prove what we say here. And now, it was really bad then. I must have played that a dozen times on my show. And I actually call Caitlin Clark Little Leslie Stahl. That's because they're like the same person, only like 30 years apart at this point. But when you see that, the interview now edited, it's 10 times worse because he's sitting there laying out the Biden crime family, who they got the money from, which oligarch's wife, where they got the money from, and they edited it to where it was still pretty good when he was making fun of the guy for eating ice cream because he's a senile dementia patient. Yeah. But it's just astounding. And again, they're the authoritative sources. That's what we're supposed to be sympathetic to and believe.
Yeah, unbelievable it was. I think, getting back to the question about China, I think China's infiltrated our government at very, very high levels. I think there's some people probably in our DOJ, in our Justice Department, and elsewhere, probably in the military, that are probably working for China. We saw this with Milley on January 6th, where he comes out and says, well, I was talking to China on the side, but I didn't tell the president, my boss. I was doing this on the side. To me, that was treason. We've got many other.
And he got a pre-pardon.
And he gets a pardon too. Yeah, no kidding. And Hunter Biden, he's over in China. They made they got $1 billion from one entity over there. Happens to be about a month before they changed the law for Chinese companies that they don't have to comply with Sarbanes-Oxley, which is this law that mandates that all corporations in America not just have evidence for their financials, but they have to have processes in place and tested every year to ensure that there's no way that something could sneak in. Now, here's my theory, Jason. We should be having that same Sarbanes-Oxley rule in our election process. That's my recommendation to save our elections. Let's make them like our corporations, where we have to spend millions of dollars to get our processes in place so that there's nothing that could happen to impact our financials. And we're testing those things all year long. We don't do that in our election process. They're broken. And quite frankly, some of the counties couldn't afford it. They'd have to go back to paper ballots because there's no way they could afford to even test these systems. Quite frankly, once they tested them, a good independent auditor is going to say, probably these things aren't safe. They're just not secure. Like was done in Georgia after the 2020 election by that Professor Halderman and the CISA. And, that's all you needed to say regarding systems in the election is they're just not certifiable. And now we've got China involved in this, in that they can put tiny little things into our computers anywhere that could track some of our information. So we don't know what they're tracking or what they might be impacting through all that. I don't think there's a danger there. We've got people probably in our government. We already know that, Hunter Biden, the Bidens in general, General Milley, and I think some of these guys in the FBI and DOJ that were involved in Russia collusion, I think there's a high likelihood that they were maybe working for somebody else. And I'm not saying that the UK is an innocent entity either. One thing I've looked at lately and received some information is how the UK has impacted this country in numerous ways, and that they were involved in the Lincoln assassination, and they're involved in the War of 1812 and the Revolution, and since then even other actions. And look at Russia collusion. What entity was involved more than the UK? It wasn't Russia. We never found anything with Russia. We had to make it up. We had to come up with these lists of people with names that had Russian names that said they were interfering in our election from afar. None of these guys been indicted, nor will they ever. We don't even know if they're real people. But that's what our DOJ said.
You don't trust that GRU report they came out with? Listen,
no, I never did.
We got to take a quick break. Final segment of the show, because I do want that criminal accountability, and I think we have to talk about that road, because one of the first things that's going to have to be done is they're going to have to rule on these pre-pardons. He mentioned Milley, but there is a slew of other people. What will the Supreme Court do? Because I don't necessarily trust them. Final segment of the show after this.
What do a neurosurgeon, a country artist, and a television and radio host have in common? They all saw the writing on the wall. Big banks sharing your financial information with big government. Join them as owners in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank that protects your privacy, security, and liberty. Invest today at own.oldglorybank.com.
Vladimir Putin will remain in office until 2036.
Putin, rated R. I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle, about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
If I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep. They filling up more energy, more get up and go. And it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
And we are back. So let's talk about that, right? First of all, I agree with you on the election integrity stuff. They need to get moving on that before the midterms. Because if they do get moving on that before the midterms, there is a good chance that you get the right people in and you can push forward in these final 2 years of that administration, whatever that looks like, hopefully in a positive direction, and then set up the air that hopefully is going to continue the country in a positive direction. Again, we're 4 weeks in, not 4 years. That's pretty pie in the sky, but it has to happen, right?
Yeah.
We also need criminal accountability.
Yeah, there's a lot of people working on that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But the criminal accountability thing, in order to do that, you just named Milley. Obviously, stripping the security clearances is one thing. I mean, you go down the line. They gave Schiff a pardon. They gave Cheney a pardon. If you had told me that Liz Cheney was going to get a pardon before her father, I mean, again, that's just how twisted everything is. Raskin gets a pardon. I mean, you're down the line. So now you do need the Supreme Court to have a session and really rule on this as soon as possible. At the same time, this process with Patel, we'll see what happens even if he gets in. I think there's a good chance he's going to get confirmed. Whether or not he can actually make the FBI's headquarters into a museum and put the remaining people to work or not, that's another question. And it's another question as to if you do have pre-pardons for a lot of these people going back a decade, I mean, do you try to charge them with crimes before that by revealing documentation? I'm sure Milley's hands aren't clean. I know damn well Fauci's hands aren't clean before 2014 either. However, I think that the establishment is kind of banking on the fact that they're not going to take it to that level of transparency because it's just too detrimental to so many of these systems. What are your thoughts about that? We got about 6 minutes left in the broadcast. What's the realistic path to criminal accountability, and what does that look like?
Well, like I said, there's a couple of crimes that there is no statute of limitations on. So that's murder and treason too. And so the good news is, if we don't get it done in the next 2 years, and we're able to fix the election process such that we have real elections and not selections, then I think we've got a little time there. To me, the key is really the election. But I agree with everything you're saying, Jason. We've got a mess. We've got a lot of people that need to be brought to justice. A lot of work to do there. I don't think we've got the people in the DOJ now that are going to do it. I think there's many, many corrupt people. You saw when Merrick Garland walked out of that building and everybody cheered. That was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. Yeah, isn't it? And you're like, what is that? So that tells us a lot. There's some, you almost got to start over. Maybe go fire everybody and go out and bring in people from the Midwest or something, bring them into the DOJ, start, these locations elsewhere where you can get people that you can trust, because the current group in DC is one thing I wanted to bring up, Jason, real quick before we go is this whole idea of the elections. And I did this a week ago, Thursday. I sent a letter to the head of the elections process in Orange County, California. Orange County is right below LA. It's a huge county. It has 6 U.S. House seats. It's a very red county. You talk to everybody out there, it's red. It's always been red up until they dropped drop boxes and ballot harvesting back in 2018. Then a couple of these 6 U.S. House seats turned blue. This last election, 5 out of the 6 turned blue. And there was some real unique phenomenon that occurred in that county in 2024. One was there was a bomb threat on Friday, days after the election. While they were still counting, 3 of these House seats turned blue after that bomb threat. So there's a lot of questions. The data didn't make sense. For example, we found that they had 300,000 more ballots that were sent out than they had people on their voter roll. So we ask about that. We get a response saying, oh, yeah, these are people that came in and voted in person. They also got a ballot in the mail. And so that's why there's extra. But don't you worry. We've checked everything to make sure nobody double voted and all that and blah, blah, blah. So we have a lot of questions. So I proposed to this head of the county election, the registrar of elections in Orange County, California, how about I come in, bring in some professionals, super professionals. We do a limited scope audit. We don't take a lot of your time, maybe a week at the most. We pay for our work ourselves, and we give you an independent professional opinion on what the results really were in 2024, or if your results are accurate. If they're accurate, we give you a professional opinion. You're going to walk away, king of the world, knowing that your results were fine. So I sent that out Thursday, have not heard back yet. Yesterday was a holiday, so I'll give them a couple days, but that's one effort that we're trying to take as far as to bring some, again, transparency to the process. Don't you tell us what you did. You, the person overseeing the process, let's bring in some independent bodies and individuals to make that assessment for you, like we do in the corporate world, where you bring in independent auditors, both internally and externally, to sign off on your numbers. So that's one effort that we're doing, really hoping we hear back in the positive and affirmative from these guys in the next couple of days. If so, can let you know. But that's what we need to do. We need to be, we need a free and transparent elections, just like you're saying. Everything we want is free, transparent, accountable, accurate, and reasonable. We don't want to be spending, $1 trillion on COVID that's lost 70% of it overseas. I heard a guy say that the other day. We don't want any more of these billions going to places that we don't want to even be. We don't want to give money to. Just it came out. We were paying for terrorists overseas. We were paying for the terrorists that killed Boca Raton. I mean, this is really, really sad for Americans to realize that behind the scenes, our government has been funding some of these operations that are, killing people and destroying this world. So, not everybody's been abreast of all that, and we're finding out more and more. So we want to fix all that. We want this country back. We don't like what's going on at all. So.
Well, I think mass declassification, not only on 60s assassinations, but so much more needs to happen. You just mentioned about firing so many of these people. If they want a true new golden age, I see no problems hiring the 18 to 24 crowd that tests well and is academically and beyond the status quo, hasn't bought in to this generational victimhood mentality. I think there's less of them out there, but they're certainly out there, and that's what this country needs, is a fresh start. You can check out everything Joe Hoft over at joehoft.com and the Gateway Pundit. Check out the Steel series over on Amazon. You know the drill with me. Folks, it is not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and I will see you right here on Patriot.tv on the flip side.